Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Now, as we look out on the suffering, tormented world under economic globalization and universal immiseration in this world economic depression, as Christmas and the end of the year, the new year approach, we see the example of Pottersville before our eyes. Remember in the famous movie, a lot of people will be watching these days and weeks, The Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart, like me, a member of Princeton Charter Club, that great Princeton Charter Club tradition of affability living on there in Jimmy Stewart. Pottersville is the world as it would have been without Jimmy Stewart, without the guy working at the local savings and loan to put people into homes, not as renters, but as owners, building up equity. Pottersville is coming our way. Pottersville is what these Tea Party fanatics are bringing us, and it's unbelievable. Of course, their base are brokers, stockbrokers, real estate brokers, insurance brokers. They're people attached to Wall Street, people who see themselves as in a kind of community of interest, in a symbiosis with Wall Street. So therefore, it's quite easy for them to buy into the Wall Street lines of argumentation as they're dished out by the American Enterprise Institute, the Cato Institute, above all, the fake libertarians, and the Heritage Foundation, the other reactionaries, along with, of course, many veterans who say, well, I've got my Pentagon TRICARE, I've got my Pentagon pension. I don't want anybody muscling in on my racket. I want to keep that for myself. So throw the other ones into the outer darkness where there's much wailing and gnashing of teeth. That's essentially the line of the Tea Party. The Tea Party banner is essentially a fist grabbing a dollar bill. My money, my money, my money, and the public interest be damned. The American people be damned. The public be damned. The most recent example, education. You've got to be able to have a college education. You want to be employable in the 21st century, you better get a college diploma. Without that, your condition is critical. And, of course, the irony of the U.S. system is that somehow it's up to you as an individual to train yourself for these corporations and banks that are going to profit from your labor power and expertise, but you've got to pay for the education. Something wrong there. Some of those costs have got to be shifted away from the American middle class. We've got to have a policy of college for all. But in the meantime, what do you do? Well, if you can't get admitted, if you don't have these impeccable academic credentials, you've got to turn to people like Kaplan University, Strayer, University of Phoenix, DeVry, people like this, the so-called for-profit college world. And how are you going to finance that? Well, you're not going to get a Pell Grant because you make a little bit of money, so you're probably going to get some student loans. And then, of course, since there's a depression, the chances are that there's going to be an elevated risk that you'll default on some of those loans. Now, enter the austerity ghouls, the Rivlins of the Democratic Party, the fanatics of the Domenici and Simpson type on the right wing, and they all agree that it's time to shut down these student loans, which have been transferred, and I think it was a positive reform. The student loans are now issued directly by the federal government, cutting out these middlemen who jacked up the price and the interest rates, but now you got to maintain that, and you've got to finance that. And, of course, they don't want to pay. We have tax cuts for the rich, but we can't have education for the American middle class. So demagogic campaign against Kaplan, Strayer, Phoenix, DeVry, and all the rest. What's the outcome? Well, we know from Charles Murray at the American Enterprise Institute, I've told you this before, his study is that 95% of the people who are in college shouldn't be there. They should be kicked out. That's the American Enterprise Institute, reactionary, neocon, Tea Party. It's all the same. That's their social program, and you're going to see some monstrosities. What they want to do is roll back the GI Bill of 1944. The GI Bill essentially says, as a reward for defeating fascism, crushing Hitler and Mussolini and Tojo, the American middle class gets to go to college. That's one of your basic appurtenances of being in the middle class. No, say the reactionaries, and they said it at the time. You're diluting the wonderful value of our elitist education. We can't have these working class people coming on our Ivy League campuses and all the rest. So roll back the GI Bill, roll back the National Defense Education Act, which was enacted when they were scared out of their wits that the Soviets had beaten them into space. The Soviets were going to beat them into the moon and the other planets, and they said, "Oh my, that's it. We've got to start financing education." National Defense Education Act by my late and dear friend Senator Ralph Webster Yarborough of Texas. So you get the idea. American tradition. If you're a conservative, well, in New England, right back in the 1600s, you have the Puritans providing school teachers in villages. The Northwest Ordinance, which was passed under the Articles of Confederation in the 1780s, the Articles of Confederation provide for public land and public money to be used for free public education in those territories, the Ohio and related areas. Horace Mann in Massachusetts, key guy to get the common school going in the 1830s and 40s. The Homestead Act, which says we're going to have land-grant colleges paid for with public money. You get the idea. If there's an American tradition, is that more and more people have to go to school. The other side of it, of course, the post-Reconstruction reactionary Southern ex-slavocrats and exploiters, right? The plantation aristocracy tried to cut the education funding to the lowest possible levels in the South in the 1880s, 1890s. Literacy rates went down, illiteracy rates went up, the deschooling on a massive scale took place, and much backwardness was generated because the richies don't want to pay. We have the example of the Kalamazoo case of 1875, which says that the rich are going to be taxed to pay for educating other people's children. No, scream the rich. And that's what Charles Murray is repeating, that long no. We don't accept the GI Bill. We don't accept the Kalamazoo case. We want to roll back the Northwest Ordinance and Horace Mann and the Homestead Act and everything else. We don't want to pay. And that's what it's coming to. And the busting of the teachers' unions, the Michel Rees of the world and their foundation backers, the Broad and the Gates and so forth, their goal is there'll be no public education and there'll be no college education. And you can say, how are you going to compete with China based on that? Well, they don't care. All they know is my money, my money, my money, and the public be damned. We'll be back in a minute.